we are going to be imposing a 25% increase. We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America.
Walk into a factory in Detroit where the roar of machines and the clang of metal should fill the air. But instead, there's a haunting silence. Assembly lines are frozen, workers are sent home with no hours to clock, and the steel that powers America's car industry is suddenly nowhere to be found. This isn't a random hiccup, it's the shockwave from a single decision that's rattling the US economy. A new 50% tariff on steel and aluminum has sent prices soaring and choked off the supply chain that keeps factories humming. Overnight, a ton of US steel jumped from $700 to $900, and Canada, which supplies over 90% of its steel to the US, slammed the brakes on shipments. Across the border, Canadian mills are firing up, redirecting their metal to local projects and new buyers overseas. Meanwhile, American automakers are scrambling. Workers face uncertain futures, and families are bracing for higher prices on everything from cars to appliances. How did a policy meant to strengthen US industry end up starving it of the one material it can't function without? Why is Canada, our closest ally, suddenly treating steel like a scarce resource to be guarded? And who's going to pay the real price? Washington, Ottawa, or the people on Main Street? Stay with us, because we're diving into the 5 forces driving this crisis, and the answers could reshape how you see the future of American manufacturing and your own wallet. The crisis kicked off with a bold move from the White House, a tariff that doubled the cost of imported steel and aluminum in a single stroke. Within hours, the price of metal bound for US factories skyrocketed, making it nearly impossible for suppliers to keep up without bleeding cash. Canada, America's biggest steel supplier, felt the impact immediately. Their mills, which have long been a lifeline for US industries, halted shipments almost overnight. For automakers, this was like cutting the oxygen to a marathon runner. A single pickup truck needs about a ton of steel, and with millions produced each year, the extra costs pile up fast. Hundreds of millions in expenses before a single weld is made. Factories in places like Michigan are slowing to a crawl, with some production lines completely shut down because the steel simply isn't there. Workers who relied on steady shifts are now waiting for calls that might not come, wondering how they'll cover rent or groceries. The fallout doesn't stop at the factory floor. Higher costs mean pricier vehicles, fewer orders from suppliers, and slimmer margins for companies already stretched thin. Car dealerships are starting to tack on surcharges, making that new family SUV thousands more expensive than it was last spring. For everyday Americans, this means digging deeper into savings just to keep up. Is a tariff meant to protect US workers actually putting them on the unemployment line? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this is only the beginning of the storm. Canada didn't just absorb the blow, they turned it into an opportunity.
Big disappointment. Economists were expecting job gains for July. Instead, we saw a loss of 41,000 positions. Outside of the pandemic, this is the largest loss going back about 7 years. And a lot of those positions were full-time jobs.
Their leaders quickly rolled out a massive plan to modernize their steel industry, funneling money into cleaner, more efficient mills. They're swapping out old coal-powered furnaces for electric and hydrogen-based systems that cut both emissions and costs. This isn't just about meeting demand at home. It's about positioning Canada as a global powerhouse in low-carbon steel. Their mills run on a grid that's already nearly emissions-free, thanks to hydroelectric dams and nuclear plants, giving them a huge edge over competitors. As Europe prepares to tax high-carbon imports starting next year, Canada's steel is poised to dominate markets overseas. They're not stopping there. Canada is also mandating that all new infrastructure, pipelines, rail lines, even service roads, use homegrown steel. That's a direct blow to US suppliers who counted on those contracts to keep their order books full. Last year, Canada sent millions of tons of steel to the US, including critical pipe for oil and gas projects. Now, that metal's staying north or heading to ports in Europe and Asia, leaving American energy companies in a bind. Small drillers in Texas and North Dakota are facing delays and higher costs, while maintenance crews are scavenging dwindling stockpiles to keep projects alive. Canada's not just protecting its industry, it's rewriting the rules of trade across the continent, and US businesses are feeling the squeeze. The auto industry is taking the the hardest hit, and it's hitting close to home for millions. In Michigan, the heart of American car manufacturing, unemployment is climbing to levels not seen in years. Local economists point to one missing ingredient: Canadian steel. Each vehicle coming off a factory line, like Ford's massive River Rouge plant, needs a ton of metal, and with prices soaring, the cost to build a single truck is ballooning. Companies are warning of billions in added expenses, forcing them to scrap profit forecasts and rethink entire production schedules. Dealerships are already passing the costs to buyers, with some models carrying new fees that make a mid-size crossover thousands pricier than it was last spring. For families, this means stretching budgets even further or skipping that new car altogether. For workers, it's the fear of layoffs as factories slow or shut down lines entirely. The ripple effect is relentless. Fewer vehicles mean fewer jobs, from assembly workers to parts suppliers to dealership staff. Lawmakers from the Great Lakes region have tried crossing the border to negotiate, begging Canada to ease their export restrictions, but Canada's holding firm, even hinting at tighter quotas on other materials if the U.S. doesn't back off. This tariff, sold as a shield for American industry, is instead choking the very factories it was meant to protect, turning Motor City into a shadow of its former self. It's a high-stakes standoff, and the outcome will decide whether America's heartland can keep its industrial pulse. While Canada's mills are thriving, Europe's quietly setting a trap that could make things even worse for the U.S. Next year, the European Union will launch a system that charges imports based on their carbon emissions. For steel, that could mean an extra 90 per ton for producers using dirtier methods. Canadian mills, powered by clean energy, are ready to meet that standard, making their steel a prime choice for European buyers. U.S. plants, still relying on coal for over half their production, are stuck in a tough spot. They'll face higher costs at home from tariffs and abroad from carbon taxes, squeezing margins that are already razor thin after years of supply chain disruptions. Canada's seizing the opportunity, redirecting steel that once fed U.S. factories to European ports, where it commands a premium. For American households, the pain is already hitting. Analysts estimate these tariffs could add over $1,200 to the average family's expenses this year, enough to wipe out a month's grocery budget. Every car, appliance, or construction project that uses steel is getting more expensive, and consumers are feeling it at every turn. From the single mom budgeting for a new fridge to the contractor pricing out a home renovation, the costs are piling up. The irony is brutal. A policy pitched as a way to save American jobs is driving up prices and sending opportunities to Canada and beyond, leaving U.S. manufacturers struggling to compete. This is where the crisis comes into focus. A tariff meant to bolster U.S. industry has backfired, starving factories of steel, idling workers, and jacking up costs for everyday Americans. Canada's not just weathering the storm. They're thriving, modernizing their mills, and locking in new markets, while U.S. plants fight to stay afloat. From Detroit's silent assembly lines to Texas oil fields waiting on pipe deliveries, the damage is real. Small businesses are losing contracts, workers are losing hours, and families are losing their ability to afford basics. The broader picture is even more daunting. As Europe's carbon rules take effect, Canada's clean steel could dominate global markets, leaving the U.S. further behind. Washington now faces a critical choice: roll back the tariffs to get steel flowing and prices down, or double down and risk a manufacturing crisis that echoes the devastation of 2008 with no bailout in sight. Will we see a policy shift that brings car prices back to earth by next spring? Or will more factories go dark as costs keep climbing? This isn't just about steel. It's about whether America can keep its industries running, its workers employed, and its families secure. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should the U.S. rethink these tariffs to save its factories? Or is holding firm worth the cost of a pricier future? This trade fight isn't staying in Washington. It's already hitting your job, your budget, and your community, and the clock is ticking.